Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I have with me Ivan Van Norman, DM extraordinaire. I mean, you've been featured on Geek and Sundry, Alpha. You have your own game. The
Yeah,
Hunters, is it Hunters RPG?
it's theoretically Hunter's Books. We just LLC'd this year. I was yelled at for making that a verb, by the way, from a gentleman who is an entrepreneur. Random story, off track, but yeah, it's called Hunter's Books. So
I often get yelled at by accountants and attorneys for the things we do. They're like, you can't do that. Business isn't done that way.
I know it's not even business; it's just using the term LLC. I formed an LLC. We've had the business for like 8 or 9 years. We've been around since Gen Con 2010, but it really has only been, accelerating to the stage in which we could make it into a real company as of like last year. So,
Nice. That's exciting. You guys also have a Kickstarter going on, if I'm correct.
yeah, Kickstarter going on, and beyond. We actually just put together. It's so funny because I asked my community manager to put together like, hey, can you grab like all the videos that people have done of playing Outbreak Undead at this point? Because a lot of people on our Kickstarter are asking for live play videos, and that's a totally reasonable ask. And so I'm trying to put together on all these collaborative pieces, and it's just like it's just me. It's just me online, like playing on Smosh games and the Geek and Sundry shows and the occasional VTT games. But there's other people who have done it, but it's all just like Roll20 kind of board game top down stuff. And I'm like, wow, hold on. It's kind of funny how hard it is to get RPG content out there in a live play format. It either looks really, really good or it really, really doesn't look good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can attest to that as being parts of both sides. Really,
right.
We literally started with most of our channel isn't about gameplays. It's about we do more of a conversational style
discussion.
Video with me and Ted and Nate, and my brother used to be a part of it. But then we realized, because we're talking about RPGs, I guess we have to show ourselves playing them. So we started recording our games and putting up the gameplays, and literally it's like a camera on the other side of the room, kind of like top down. It's horrible, and we still do it that way, by the way. But people watch it, like it.
That's good. I mean, it's I've always realized that when the farther away the camera is, the more impersonal it can sometimes be. But I guess with role-playing games, it can still just permeate even beyond that, because people it's so interesting. We're here right now, Richard, with like this we are so hungry for interpersonal relationships that like role-playing games is becoming part of the worldwide zeitgeist again, because as we get more and more digital, we begin to crave face-to-face interaction more and more, and it was the outlet that it was 50 years ago. It's a different kind of outlet now, because it hasn't changed. The appeal has been there since the 50s, but at the same time, it's just the need of culture is so different than what it was back when they were doing Lake Geneva at Gen Con all those years ago. So, man, we got into a history lesson here. Oh my Jesus! Shoot me.
It's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. Going back to the live plays, like I said, I've run the gamut. Everything from higher produced, the talking heads, in boxes, to like I said, us at our table with our group, and we've talked about doing cooler stuff. Like you guys on Alpha have done some really cool stuff.
Oh shit! Yeah, well, I don't even know how we went from like, hey, let's do just for your viewers who may not know, the Sagas of Sundry Dread was a kind of, it was a sequel to the International Tabletop Day game I ran of Dread with Matt Mercer, Satine, Amy Dallin, Amy Vorpal, and Taliesin. And when we did that, it was just fun. And it was basically me being like, hey, man, I'm producing International Tabletop Day. I want to put a role-playing game in on the 18-hour live stream. Would you play a game of Dread with me? And it was really just me going to my friends, particularly the ones that I knew would say yes because they owed me. So I just went to the people who I knew I had the best chance of getting in a game because I only had a week. I had literally a week to prepare for that session while producing International Tabletop Day at the same time. And when it ended up being like the thing of the day, all the people at Alpha were like, let's do that. Let's do that again. But this time, here's money to do it. And then I was like, okay, sure. And then I got a director involved that I really, really like, Adam Lawson, who worked on Tabletop with Will Wheaton and a couple of other projects that just look really good. And then we just sat down and had a couple of really strong meetings in which we just took the concept of DMing around having a table-less game and how to make it extremely immersive since we had a diceless game that we were working with, if that makes any sense.
Also do you also have like a Vincent Price character that kind of comes in.
Oh, Darren DePaul, yeah.
And also, Satine must owed you big time to get her to play something that wasn't D&D.
Girl, that girl still owes me favors as well. But yeah, no, she's Miss Queen of D&D, but I don't think she would turn down an opportunity to play with some of her favorite people. So it was super, super fun. And actually, speaking of Darren DePaul, we're shooting his Mr. Wren opening for Madness today. So I'll be going in and getting his pickups literally this afternoon. So he's got some cool stuff. I've actually, in my other window here, I have all of his marketing bumps and all of his, basically the script for all 7 episodes that I gotta do after we're done talking today.
Exciting. That'll be season 2. Now,
season 2, Madness.
Season 1, you even made people cry, right?
Well,
and get tattoos.
Okay, yeah. Yes.
What's gonna happen on season 2? How do you top that? Crying and
I don't know. Maybe they'll name their kids after my characters. I don't know. Let's do that. Yeah, no, it's really, that is, when you put it in the context like that of it's kind of, I'm happy when I can make a real moment with my players happen and make them feel something and like really get into it, enjoy it. But then to have that permeate into an audience is a whole new bag of dicks. So I'll tell you what, I was really, really, surprised, elated, and
maybe a little scared.
Well, yeah, a little scared myself, you know. But seriously, some of these, like especially these Pavlonia's like "Do What You Dread" the tattoo with her with the goat skull and all the characters' different symbols on it. It was like the meaning that the people got out of this. I'm just really happy that I could help people in a way that translated to something that they could relate to, you know. So there's a great video game that I dived into pretty deeply called Hellblade: Sensuous Sacrifice, and it was on PS4, and it essentially is it's only a $20 game, but it's a very streamlined, railroaded kind of adventure game in which the main character has an extreme form of like paranoid schizophrenia, mental illness, delusions. And it's an awesome title that deals with some great, that like on the side just is a great message about mental illness. And playing that, it made me kind of like, you know, feel like, wow, okay, you know, this is how you can do art and still get a message across. And I felt really good about that. So
nice. Looking at all the board games over your shelf, and I'm also wondering how you do everything you do, have a toddler, have a company, and play video games.
Oh man, it's rough. Like, thank God I have an awesome girlfriend who likes to hang out and binge play video games with me at night after we put the kid to sleep. So, yeah, no, I mean, it seems like a lot, but at the same time, it's really not. I mean, this is what I've transitioned to. This is what I love. Like, you know, I mean, hell, you're operating your own network. You've got 2 kids. You know, you've got your job. It's like we all do what we do to make us happy, and this is thankfully what makes me happy. You know, trust me, I'm not playing video games like I used to.
Thankfully, this year I actually got rid of the day job so that I just do this, which is super helpful.
It's super congrats.
Still like an 80-hour work week anyway, but you know, at least
you know, right? Like they say that I wanted to say it's actually your boss's day today. So I think it's like boss's day officially, like October 16th. And so I was joking with my girlfriend. I was like, oh, boss's day. Well, I guess I should get me something. So maybe I'll get myself a spa day or something. No, I don't deserve that. Go back to work, you monkey.
Yeah.
You know. And that was essentially the mental exchange I had with myself, because I am my own worst boss. So
I totally feel that. So we were talking a little bit before we got started, and we're like, "What do you want to talk about?" And I was like, "We could probably talk about horror games. This seems to be a big thing for you." And I feel like it's and you know, you kind of summed it up. You're like, horror games are hard, and I agree. Especially, let's face it, most people that play role-playing games, they usually come in through Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And you know, when you come into role-playing games that way, it's hard to be afraid of the monster.
Right. It's hard to be afraid of the monster, mostly because Dungeons and Dragons is building you to beat the monster, is what it is. Like it is glorified hero worship. It is dramatic self-improvement over the course of the campaign. You know, D&D minus Ravenloft, which has some, you know, scary elements inside of it, unless you have consequences to your actions, it's hard to set stakes. Is the challenge. It's hard to set stakes in a fantasy world unless you make it real for them.
You know what? You just nailed it right on the head there, because so many times when we give advice to videos and we talk about consequences, you don't even know the amount of backlash we get about that. Oh no, just let the players do what they want. I would just let them do that. And the thing is, when we're talking about consequences, and I just kind of talked about this in our newsletter recently, I'm like, well, the consequences go both ways, good and bad. It's just depends what you do. But when we're addressing questions, we're getting the murder hobo question, right?
Right.
And for that, the consequences will probably be bad for your players because they're being assholes. In real life, if you're constantly an asshole,
you're gonna be treated like an asshole.
Yeah.
You know? And here's the other part of it too, is that it also depends on the kind of game you're playing as well too. If you're looking to if your players all want a murder hobo spree where they can get away with murder, then you know what? If that's what they all want to play, then play that. Like there's nothing wrong with that kind of game. It's especially if that is what has been communicated as the thing that they want. At the same time, if there are some players who want something with a little more depth, and then there's the players who just, you know, want to kill, loot, and raid, then you've got some conflict of interest there, and there's a good chance that someone's going to go home unhappy. You know, so it is about, unfortunately, in this world in which people have a hard time getting together a group to even play a game, there's the additional issue of making sure that your group is all in alignment with what kind of game they want to play. And sometimes that can just be as easy as picking the same board game for the night that you all want to play. Like if you can get to that stage of things, then you can get to that stage in your campaign as well too. You know, thankfully, I've always played with players who are extremely mutable and can roll with whatever. If we want to play a highly narrative story, they're all down. If they want to play a hack and slash dungeon crawler, hey, they're all down. You know,
that all really just starts with communication and talking to each other, which Which, based off the questions we get, I was like, I always wonder, like, who are you playing these games with, and do you guys even talk to each other? Or do you just show up and start chucking dice?
People get excited, man. Like, especially if you find a group that you haven't, and you've been looking for a group for a long time. People get excited and they just want to do it. They just want to get into it. But like any other good, craft, it's like a little bit of prep goes a long way. Like if you're going to sit down and draw your first portrait and you don't have any pencils, well, yeah, you could want to draw all you want and you can go scrounge around your home to try to find anything in which to write with. But, you know, that may not be the thing that you want if you had actually taken the time to go and get the proper tools that you wanted to in order to sit down and draw. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. So first step, everyone wants to play the right game, so is what I'm hearing. So where do you go from there if you're trying to build up suspense and horror and you know, genuinely, you know, elicit those emotions from your players?
Mm-hmm. Where do you go? Where do you go? Well, I guess that is the question of the hour for everybody, isn't it? It's like it's so hard because I'm obviously extremely spoiled. I live in a large metropolitan area that has a very active nerdy community. So, you know, if I put a Facebook group up tomorrow saying, "Hey, who wants to play a game?" I'm going to get a strong response. At the same time, if for a lot of people who aren't in a highly populated area, it just, I guess, comes down to like they are there, they do exist. You just need to take the time, effort, and energy to look. And if you don't find success,
I meant less physical, more metaphysical as far as playing the game.
Oh, after you sit down? Well, I mean, for me, it's like any good host, like the best, you know, when you invite someone to your home for the first time, like if you're throwing a party or something, you always want to provide suggestions, but be willing to take a turn depending on what the flow of the party is. So if I brought my whole group together, I'd be like, guys, here's what I want to run. Here's what I like. And then what do you think? Does this sound interesting to you? And then get feedback onto it. There's that option. Or you can give them what I like to call the in and out marketing strategy. So the in and out marketing strategy is that you can either order a number 1, a number 2, or a number 3. You know? And so do you guys want this campaign, which is super fluffy and interesting? Again, this is all hopefully before you've built all 3 of them. Do you want to do this super narrative socio-political campaign that I think would be super fun? Or do you want to do this dungeon crawler that I picked out of the Adventure League, you know? And that would probably be a nice way to start. I know that last time that I just ran a game with just friends, I literally, and I was that asshole. I had 3 campaigns already prepped and ready to play. And so just depending on what they picked, I just pulled that out of a binder. And then we made characters for an hour and then ran it. So, yeah, for me, it's just give them some options so they feel like they have a choice, not unlike what you do when you're actually running the game. Or B, you know, try to convince them of what you want to do and then let them tweak and adjust as per their wants and whims. So, because again, they feel like they're participating in the creation of the campaign, then they have more invested into it. Oh yeah, I picked this and I wasn't told I'm going to play this. This is something that I picked. Therefore, I am involved and interested from the get-go.
Yeah, that jives right along with the advice we often give. Don't vomit what you want on your players. Instead, take what they give you and throw it back at them. It almost guarantees a reaction as opposed to, you know, figuring out what you're going to do now because they don't like your ideas.
Yeah, it's a game of reactions, man. Like, just, you know, react. And don't freak out when you don't get the reaction you want. Roll with the punches, man. As I like to say, I think Satine and I talked about this a little bit in DM tips. It's like, I often feel like when you're running a table with people who are throwing a lot of stuff at you, who are just giving you a lot of content, it's like the you have to shift as a DM into like kind of Tai Chi mode where you absorb all that energy and you turn it around and redirect it and push it right back. Like if you just take it and assault and barrage onto you, you're just gonna get burnt out. But if you can redirect all of that energy into something that really makes the player feel like that they're invested and involved in whatever they're doing, then you know you got to win. So, or at least you're going to get a good story out of it.
That, you know, that is actually always my favorite thing to do, is to take in what they've been talking about and listening to the players, and just like you said, throwing it back out there. It almost guarantees that they're going to bite on those hooks and they're going to be excited to do it. And sometimes they don't even realize it was their idea. They're like,
right.
They're like, you're the best DM ever. You have the best ideas.
Well, no, you're feeding them to me is what you're doing. That is the classic iteration of the yes and improv style, which is what a lot of role-playing games take at. It's the yes and. So if a player gives you something, you say yes and, then you are essentially taking what they've given you, and then it's your choice what to do with that information later when you come back to it. You know? So if you in my mind, being a GM is 80% yes and 20% no but. So always provide a solution outside of no.
Like, I have one player that always tries to friend the monsters, and this is only fun because I let her friend the monsters sometimes.
Right.
But sometimes the monsters try and eat her face for it.
And that's fair. Or even better, it's like if I had someone friend the monster and there was like another character with a familiar or something else, it's like, yeah, no, there's definitely like there's gonna be some like dogs fighting kind of situation where the two animals are going at each other. And oh man, if you wanted to elicit a response with something horror, there's nothing more anxiety driving than two animals fighting each other right in front of you that you're trying to pull apart. Like if you're walking a dog and someone else is walking the dog and suddenly that dog gets away from you and just starts going to town on that other one, that is terrifying. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I can't think of anything that I've experienced in life that is more disturbing than that, because it's just two dogs especially, and that's
right. Well, even just anxiety, like it's just like even thinking about it is something that just kind of gets the chemicals in your brain going what. So
it's just so primal. It just speaks to our lizard brains,
mm-hmm.
and gets something going. The fight or flight response. If one of them happens to be your pet,
do that with your character that's friending all the time. Have them do a dog fight. Like, give them another NPC that has like a similar, like a ranger with a trained companion or something, and then just have them be that asshole dog owner, unless they do something in order to like really train, and they got to commit to that animal. It's not just, oh, I get a goddamn zoo, I knew a player like that who basically wanted to keep a menagerie with her at all times as well too. And again, just like owning a dog in real life, you got to take responsibility for your animals. So
I love that stuff, because it makes those players invested in their characters in the game. So many DMs just were like, no, you can't have that pet wolf or this or that, where it just like pushes them out of the game instead of pulling them in and be like, well, this could be your next adventure hook.
Well, this is, and it's also the next stage on that too, is that, and I think this is some unfortunately where you get a little bit of the blowback a little bit is that when you go to that next stage, you're like, okay, well, I allowed you to have the monster, but now I'm giving you a consequence to that choice, which is this dog fight. Then, players may resent you for putting them in that situation, and then you have to be willing to come back and be able to make it into it again, because again, D&D often is viewed as, it is my glorified story that I'm telling of myself, in which I'm always going to come out on top, but what is gain without loss, as they say. So
my last session, the paladin that came into our game is like, can I have a cool ox-like mount? And I'm like, sure. Here's this thing from Veloz's Guide on a rock. You can absolutely have it. They bring it into the game. One of the very first encounters they get into with it, the enemy uses telekinesis to use it like a battering ram against the players. It's a blast.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a blast. So, and then at some point, like I'm always down for the narrative structure of like, give them a success, give them a win, but not as good of a win as they hoped, and then give them Like it's the end of the first act structure, as they like to say. After your inciting incident, and after you've got to then present the challenge, is then you start whittling them down. Because the one thing that I've always had a hard time with is like I don't like to give. Like I had a GM one time who savorishly enjoyed having us load up on equipment because we were going on a boat. So we did this big pre-game shopping trip, and then he sinks the ship as part of like the beginning of the game. We went through all this effort to like buy all of this stuff, and then we had to pick what was absolutely necessary when we abandoned shipped. And while I got the whole point of what that meant to be, it was supposed to be, a only get what's necessary. It felt like a lot of wasted time to be able to put this all together and then lose all that, when it would have been nice, like if we had like in the second session or the third session, if we had that ship sunk. So it's like the idea is that we got used to having that stuff with us and then had it taken away from us, then would have had more of an impact instead of just being like, oh, we got all this stuff and now it's gone. All right, well, whatever.
Or you could have literally just did a shopping montage, and then when the boat sank, said you can only save 3 things. What are they?
Right. And that's the thing. It's just make it, don't have a. So I've always been a little bit against of like give a player something and then immediately take it away, because it's the equivalent of like handing a toddler a ball and then being like, you know what? No, give me back that ball. It's like they're gonna whine. You just gave them the ball. Like they want to play with the ball. So it's weird. You could probably make way more comparisons with GMs playing with players as toddlers. So
that sounds pretty appropriate. So let's sort of circle back to Zombie Outbreak. There's kind of like an interesting story how you guys came up with that game.
Yeah, so Outbreak Undead was essentially a zombie survival simulation RPG that back in 2010, when like Max Brooks' Zombie Survival Guide first came out, it was like 2010 was the year of your zombie survival plan, man. It's like everybody had one. Everybody knew what they were going to do. There was a big discussion. It was kind of what I like to call like it was a resurgence of the modern zombie craze again, because the remake of Dawn of the Dead came out around then. 28 Days Later had only come out like a year before then. So it was a good time to kind of be interested in that stuff. And so when me and my college buddies were all talking about our zombie survival plan, Chris De La Rosa, who's my business partner now, said, well, I kind of been working on this game. And for him, it was just he got obsessed with this game. It was called Resident Evil Outbreak. All right. And it was essentially a game before its time on the PS2, in which it was players who had, or characters that had almost zero inventory capacity and were just trying to do these little escape missions. But there was like 5 or 6 different players. And it was supposed to have internet compatibility, but it was 2010 back then and on a PS2. So, connections for consoles were shit.
It was a great idea.
Yeah, it was a great idea that was poorly implemented. So it was this awesome concept, and Chris loved it so much that he's like, "Oh man, I gotta make a game. I gotta make a role-playing game around this." So originally it was kind of a Resident Evil-ish version of that, and but we quickly stripped that away from it and kind of built this game out. And that game would eventually become Outbreak Undead. We played it in our last couple years of college, and everyone loved it. People just ate it up. And so at some point we're like, man, this is really good. We should do something with this. It's the right time, and no one's doing it. At the time, All Flesh Must Be Eaten had been out of print for 6 years. There was no zombie RPG on the market, and certainly not one that was doing realism factors around it. So we took out a loan, because Kickstarter wasn't a thing back then. And we printed the book, and we brought it to Gen Con of 2010. We were in Entrepreneur's Alley, and it did surprisingly well. I mean, thank God it did surprisingly well. So, and
everyone gets to keep their asses.
Everyone gets to keep their asses. It's true. It was very much of like, well, we didn't sink ourselves into a hole, thankfully. Yeah, so we printed it, and then I found a publisher, and I used Gen Con as an opportunity to go and make all of these arrangements to kind of become a legitimate business with a product. We made our first batch of terrible mistakes, and then managed to surface by them and continue to sell. We put out another book, and then we put out another book, and then we put out another book, and now I actually did a I did a little experiment last night. I'll just show you. Grab it real quick. Hold on.
And for anyone joining in, there's plenty of links in the description so you can find the stuff that Ivan is attached to.
Yeah. So let's see. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 25, 27, 20. We printed almost 30 books at this point now, you know, or 30 products between card decks and books. So we've got now we've got something like 30 unique product codes under the company's belt at this point. Over the last 8 years, and it all came about with our current campaign, which is Outbreak Undead 2nd edition, which is now running on Kickstarter. We've reached 3 times the goal at this moment.
You guys are totally crushing it.
Not too bad for an RPG campaign, and those can be a little tough. Like we all can't be 7th Sea and crush 7 figures every single time we hit the internet. But I have to say, it's also very hard to get, especially niche. Like RPGs are already niche, but then you go into the zombie category, especially survival horror, because we are looking after those wonderful people who are not looking for that D&D experience of glorified self-improvement. We are looking to crush your soul with the realism that is real life when you're playing yourself as a character in a post-apocalyptic scenario. So
is that part of the stick? You're playing yourself?
Yeah, no, the game is one of the big first marketing hooks on it was you can create yourself as a character, and you do that differently, because there's not a lot of games out there that do avatar systems, which is create yourself as a character. But what we do is we actually have a 40-question personality test that you take online, and then once it's done, it pops out your core stats if you were to play yourself as a character. So
that's kind of cool.
It's literally a Myers-Briggs-esque psych eval that will then give you your standard layout, and then you can use that to create yourself as a character, because also there's a couple mechanics that support that. There's a system called Gestalt, which applies practical experience into your skill set. So your Gestalt is usually made up of a number of dice that's based on your age with some modifiers. I think you get up to 35, and then you get 1 for every 5 years after 35. And then you can take that dice pool and apply practical experience into it. Like, for example, an analogy I like to use all the time is that I pick up a hand grenade for the first time, right? Now I've got a throw stat. I've never thrown a hand grenade before, but maybe I've thrown a softball. Okay, and they're about similar size and weight, and grenades are not meant to be difficult things to use. But if I've got a great softball pitch, I could appeal to the GM and be like, hey man, I was varsity, all right? And, I threw like 90-mile-an-hour, underhand softballs. And I think my practical experience applies to my throw stat in this circumstances. And the GM can be like, okay, well, how many years were you varsity? 3. Okay, take 3 dice from your Gestalt pool and roll yourself up a permanent bonus to your throw stat that is a result of that practical experience that you've applied to in your life. Does that make sense?
It does. I always find it the hardest to play myself in games, and we've done it twice, since we've done Nerdarchy. We did like this D&D overlay of a modern game, Nerdarchy Saves the World, that was run for us, and then we did recently a Marvel Phase Rip game where we played ourselves, got sucked into the Marvel universe, and started this figuring out our powers as we go.
Well, yeah, you're being thrown around with a bunch of superheroes though as yourself. That's a little tough.
Oh yeah. I was like, well, even regular people. I'm in a bank and there's a bank robber. I'm like, that guy has a gun. What do you think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do what he says.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And so when you when you have something like the chaos and milling of the zombie apocalypse out there, is that you tend to, on Outbreak, we break it up into 4 different Outbreak levels. Like, this is just kind of usually the general stage of chaos. OL level 0 is like pre-inciting incident. OL level 1 is like the chaos and anarchy of, like, it's not even so much about the zombies that are the problem, or the what we call opponents, because you can play creatures that are sentient, biologically alive, and runners. You know, they call those infected, but they don't have to be undead. They do not have to be zombies in order to play them in the game. But the general milling chaos is usually Outbreak level 1. Usually the, like, you know, after the first wave of chaos is Outbreak level 2, when people are just kind of using up the last of their food stores. And then Outbreak level 3 is when, you know, it's essentially like there's no going back at this point. This is a new world kind of a situation. So it can get very, it's a sandbox system. So what Outbreak Undead mostly does is it provides you with a tool set in order to create the post-apocalyptic survival horror scenario of your choice. And it can do that in a large variety of everywhere from, like, super easy to run, we call it arcade mode. You know, one of the things we explain in the Kickstarter campaign is that these 2 core rule books, anything that's got a green highlighter on its header is a basic, you must learn this rule in order to play the game. But if you see anything with a yellow highlighter, well, that's if you want more realism in your game. You can apply those to your game if you want, but only if you want more realism. And then the red stuff that's marked in red is like, well, that's for if you really want to make it hard on yourself and add some real crunch to it that's going to make you even more realistic, you know, stuff like that.
Excellent. I want to jump in the chat and start grabbing some of these questions.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So
where is chat at?
The chat is actually on the watch page I had sent you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead then.
Elfbait, biggest question I have: how do you preserve horror with an ongoing campaigns?
Ooh, horror with an ongoing campaign is the toughest. So mostly because horror tends to want to give you a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, one of the things that I learned when I first started doing Dread is that in the ITTD game, I got away with having essentially 2 horrors, like 2 did I just call them horrors? Yeah, well, essentially 2 different elements. It was the environment, like the caves underneath, and then the goat man. All right, and the goat man had its own set of weird. But then when I pushed it into Sagas of Sundry Dread, I realized, well, if I'm going to do 6 episodes of this thing, I've got to have more than just the goat man. Like, there's got to be other things, other layers that are playing into this. And if you look at some of the best horror games, like the ones that do manage to sustain horror over a long period of time, like Until Dawn is a great example of how to do sustained horror, as well as even games like even games like Resident Evil 7 managed to do it as well too. Is that you have to break up the action and make it fresh. Like, you can't get away. Like, if you're just having a 3-hour-long movie, so to speak, like Alien or Aliens, like if you're doing space, you can get away with just having one threat. But if you're going to do sustained campaigns, you've got to basically escalate it. So, you know, my opinion would be, if you want to do sustained horror, start small, ramp it up into even bigger. So start with something scary, but it's a small thing. Like, if I want to use like a 7 layers of hell kind of situation, you know, start with imps, make imps really scary. Like, just literally make something that is an impish level something to really fear, so that when they get to demons, it raises up. And then when you get to, you know, pit fiends, it gets even worse. Then you get all the way to Balrogs, you know, greater demons. And the idea is that you always have to keep it fresh. You always have to scale it up, and you always have to break the horror up with actions. Dead Space is another great example. Like, there's a lot of action in that game, but it breaks the action up with suspenseful mood pieces that give players a rest so that you can then go back into it. But, you know, horror is a lot about like, what's the next thing? What is the next hook? What is the next gimmick? What are you going to do next to challenge your player's mental state, not just the challenges of the game? It's tough, man.
Do you do a lot of playing with highs and lows? Like,
Yeah.
for instance, like you do a really scary scene, you get them on edge, and then
Bring it
drop
down.
into like a piece of comedy or something.
Yeah, and players actually will do that more than you will, because if you give them a fucked up scenario in which to deal with, naturally your brain will want to cope with it. So what I usually do is I give them a really tense situation to deal with, and then I let them all release their coping mechanisms, and I let those coping mechanisms play out until they start getting like distracted or start, you know, getting diverted away from the path at hand, and then I reel them back in, you know. But players will more often than not play out their own coping mechanisms. So another thing to do with ongoing campaign, and this is something I thought about now, but it was obviously very helpful in Dread, is that take scheduled breaks, but don't let it be loosey-goosey free time. Like if people have the opportunity to get up out of their seat to go use the bathroom, or, you know, go get a drink or do food or anything like that, there's no quicker way to break the mood with horror. Like you need everybody there, focused, intent to it, reacting off of each other. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is be like, guys, we'll have a break in 15, and, you know, we'll do a break at 3:30 for 15 minutes, but just hold out until then. You know,
maybe dial down the thermostat a little bit.
Yeah, sure, whatever it takes. I mean, horror is something that's so sensory, so it is not a bad thing to be able to play off of those sensory experiences. One of the reasons, I mean, that's one of the reasons why there's even a game system called 10 Candles, is because it is supposed to build, it's a game that is built around the idea of making it dark and removing light from key plot points, during key plot points. Nothing wrong with using sensory. I mean, shit, I made, spoiler alert, so deal with it. I made Amy Dallin reach her hand into a box full of cockroaches and mealworms. All right. So it's just, now granted, she knew that I was going to do messed up stuff. So you don't just want to bring that on your players. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with, if you want to do something in order to have an effect on your player and make a sensory experience, as long as they're all cool with it beforehand and they know what they're getting into, it can make for a really good time. So that's why Halloween.
Why do you have a box of mealworms and cockroaches?
No, we got them. I had a PA go out and get them. All right.
There you go, DMs. Go have your PA go out and
just do it. Just hand them a Benjamin and be like, get as many mealworms as you can. Go down to the reptile supply store and go buy a bunch of mealworms. So
that's great.
Throw them in a box and take the box and line it with Vaseline. All right, so that the mealworms can't crawl up it. All right, and then just shove their hand in there. She had a little tiny piece of thin paper that was the hole, so she couldn't see into it. So I had really thin paper, and we told her, "Hey, the key's in there. Get the key."
That's great. So TrueMate has a question about Outbreak. So Outbreak Undead, are the zombies basic variety or modified? What flavor is
zombie? Whatever you want them to be. That's the best part. So there's these things called horror traits in the game. So if I wanted to make a sentient, biologically alive, tool-wielding opponent, that's basically a raider. But if I wanted to make a, you know, super strong, make maybe chitinous spines, lumbering, shambling horde, I could do that. In fact, I could even redefine that as a clicker from like Left 4 Dead if I wanted to, with chitinous plates and shambling, although those were assholes. But the point is that you can mix and match your zombie type however you want. So if you want to play the shambling horde, play the shambling horde. I'm making a bunch of opponents right now for a property that we're getting involved with called We're Alive, which is the zombie podcast. So I'm making their creatures into stats for Outbreak Undead right now. But, you know, they've got a whole new set of rules that are different than the shambling horde, because everybody's Outbreak scenario is different. If you wanted to make vampires from like I Am Legend and just make like the vampire horde, do it, man. Like the system allows you to build it all. You know, we've got pre-gens, we've got, you know, stats for all of the really well-known ones, but make your own.
Awesome. I'm going to go into roll call, guys. So if you want to sound off where you guys are coming from, I'll get to another one of these questions.
Yeah, I'm going to post this up as well, too. Go ahead.
So Amnesia, the Dark Descent, are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. It's horrifying due to what you can't see. And this is from Jay Kawai. It's horrifying because what you can't see, you have no weapons, you have to run. How would you run a game like this?
How would I run Amnesia, the Dark Descent? I got to think about that. Question. I'm trying to tweet this out as well, too.
Yeah. I think it was you. You were telling about a zombie game that you ran with the two friends that hadn't played games before, two young ladies.
Oh, yeah.
Great story.
Yeah, so they were best friends, and unfortunately they got into a situation where they were playing with a gentleman who was very familiar with role-playing games, and he actually even very familiar with Outbreak Undead, and he made his tiny little militia that used like Spartan phalanx tactics, where they like shielded up and basically made like a ball, and they went through every engagement. They formed a tactic, and you know the game rewards players who use tactics in the game. Someone who basically, guess what, has a plan for how to engage the enemy. Surprise, surprise. Instead of just running in there with a crowbar and hoping everything's going to be okay. So they were just kicking ass, and they were kicking ass so much that I felt like I had to scale it up, because they were just going through my kind of like my demo session very, very without issue. And I felt like they weren't being challenged because this guy was just like stalked and locked, and they had managed to take a bunch of he went straight to a construction site, got a really great search roll, and found a bunch of abandoned rebar. So they basically all were like, you know, rebar in the dirt, pole arming kind of situation. So I scaled it up. I gave them some creatures that were faster, because right now they were engaging enemies without any problems. So I made them engage them faster and kind of started, you know, throwing more bodies at them, so to speak. And unfortunately, one of their players, despite all the advantages that they were getting, managed to not kill the one that was on their left, or killed it, or like impaled it, but didn't end it. So it was sliding down the rebar, coming close to them, but they couldn't kill it. And since her friend, who was essentially acting as the rear guard, with like, you know, with just some melee weapons, the creature slid down the rebar, you know, just snarling and grabbing at the entire time. Not grabbing the rebar, but just grabbing them. But then she grabbed a hold of her friend, pulled itself down onto the rebar, and then managed to get a bite attack onto her friend. And she felt so responsible because she was holding the damn thing that was impaling it, and she wasn't able to let it go. She wasn't comfortable enough. If she just let it go, they could have like disengaged the creature off her, but she didn't let go of the weapon, and so it bit her friend. And the kind of like moment in which this is all being described in the game, I could see like her friend who was being bit, she just had this big smile on her face. She was just enjoying it. She's just kind of like loving this narrative moment that's happening in the game. And I'm talking to her about it, like describing to her what's happening. But then I look over to her friend who's sitting right next to her, and there's just like tears running down her face, you know, because she just had such a hard time coming to terms with that responsibility that came as a result of that failed action. And it was her friend. So she really put herself in that situation of, I lost my friend. It was very, very powerful and wonderful and intense. And everyone had a great time. But it made me realize just how much consequences can really mean something when it's playing yourself as a character. Yeah.
Yeah,
What was the question again?
that is like the power of RPGs. I'll give you the question, let you think about it, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump into the roll
Oh,
call.
that's it. Amnesia. It was the
Yeah.
amnesia question,
So
right?
while you're thinking
Yeah.
about that, I'm going to jump into the roll call and see where people are coming from.
Okay.
Got Todd in Dallas. Lincoln is in Sweden. Truemate is in Wales, UK. We have Jay in Portugal. We've got Comic Book University in Holopolis. We've got Monroe, Louisiana in the house with Jacob. We got Raven coming out from the OZ. Staff editor Doug is in Cleveland. We got Phoenix in the house with Julian. Geek and Undies is in Ohio. Elfbait is in Washington. We got Orlando in the house with Thomas. Sean Jones, Santa Barbara. We've got Brian Collin in Georgia. AJ Kinney, Lopez Island, Washington. We got Patrick in Sweden. Stephen is coming to us from Irving, Texas. We got more Florida with Vladimir. I see Jacksonville with Kareem. We've got Arkansas with Josh. Virgilio is in Long Beach, California, normally in Utah. We've got that one lazy guy from Western Australia. We got Zaref Gaming. He's in there from Redizio, New Mexico. We've got Kevin from Boston. We've got Gableton from Sweden. That's 3 for Sweden today. We've got AZ Crazy from Phoenix, Arizona. David S. is in Washington, Seattle. So we got people coming in from all over the place.
Yeah, it's great.
So,
well, I think thinking about Amnesia: The Dark Descent, I have played the game, and it is absolutely a mood game for sure. Like, it is playing a lot on various visual elements, and it does have a lot of it is playing mostly with darkness and your mind. All right, so part of me would be part of me would want to do a few things. One of the reasons that Amnesia is so good as well too is because it is a solo experience. So I do it in 2 different ways. I'd either run it as a one-on-one with somebody, or I would do it with a small group, like 2 or 3. So if it wasn't being filmed, here's how I would do it. I would run it at night, obviously, or at least make the room pitch black. I would light a single lantern that would essentially be the light of the game. And we'd probably use 10 candles as a system to do this. So I'd probably build it around the 10 candle system. But instead of having the light snuff out, because in 10 candles, it's like the dice determine when the candles go out as the timeline goes by. So you just take one out. Instead of this, I would just leave the lantern on. And then when key points in the dice roll come up where it would call for it to snuff a candle out, I would just snuff the lantern out, and we would continue to tell the story until they either found lamp oil or whatever it would be in order to turn it back on. Because again, the game is mostly about discovering and looking around. And then I would 100% make it a mood piece. I would do the exact same thing that Amnesia does. Would not give them a weapon. I'd give them a very, very, very clear goal of what they need to do, which is get through the doors, get out. And I would probably color code it for their own purposes, because you can't, in that game, it's so visual, like what the door is in order to get on the way out. I would essentially make it so that it's like, if they see a red door, they know that's the right door. Or if they see the blue door, they know that's a door they've already been through. So again, giving them a very streamlined path and being very narrative about what's in front of them, and then constantly pull on those elements of sound especially, and sight, and then just give them things to work with, and use the light as the same way that Dread uses the tower in order to build tension in the game. I would make the lantern that centerpiece, and I would turn it down or turn it up depending on what the mood of the game is at that time. If they're exploring and they're getting through things. And then unlike Amnesia, I would probably not have it be so empty. I would definitely be putting the various plot points of the story, because that's just an exploration game. I'd put a lot more notes, I'd put a lot more drops, I'd put a lot more story elements into it to kind of tell the story as they're going from area to area. But it would equivalently be a hidden dungeon crawl that I would have my notes in order to show where they're going, and I would have my key story drops going through the process. But then again, the mechanic with the players would essentially be this lantern that I would turn on or off or lower and bigger, and then accompany it with sound in order to punctuate the terror element of whatever the creature is. So, and then of course reveal the damn thing every once in a while so that they feel like they've got to run and go through it and hit against the wall or whatever. Like just like give them the cockroaches crawling across the screen kind of element to it, but then just have it just like, you know, a lumbering figure comes out across the side, it screeches as it pulls its claws towards you, that kind of situation. Yeah, I might do that now. That's kind of fun.
I must say the hair and mutton chops are getting a lot of love in the comments.
Oh yeah, thanks guys. I trimmed them up just for you today.
Zareth Gaming question: what do you prefer, survival horror, gothic horror, or cosmic horror? I mean, you do make a survival horror game, but
man, that's tough. It's like saying, do you like chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry? They're all different flavors.
The Dread game, what flavor is that?
Oh, that's the Dread game is 100%. It's not gothic horror. I think it's thriller is really what it is. Like Sagas of Sundry Dread is a thriller. And then Sagas of Sundry Madness is more a gothic horror, like Lovecraftian horror kind of attitude around it. I'm always a big fan of survival horror. Like I've actually got I'm one of those weirdos that backs a lot of indie RPGs just because I love seeing what new people are doing, because you always have to innovate when you're at the indie level, right? So I found this thing. It's called Preservant, and it is essentially this is a survival horror game that the only opponent is nature. Like it is literally surviving in the woods role-playing game. And it's a cooperative storytelling game where they're literally passing the buck, but it's a press your luck RPG in which you have a certain amount of dice that you begin with, but you lose dice, and every single time you roll, if you continue to lose dice and you get under a certain success threshold, something bad happens and you've got to sacrifice something in order to get through the situation, you know? And it's awesome. It can make those like alone or naked and afraid kind of situations that are so interesting. I've also got another one. Hold on. Be right back.
All right, guys. So as we wait for Ivan to come back with that, which is cool, that he's totally into what's going on.
I backed this one on Kickstarter as well, too. This is Innocence, which is essentially a, how do I describe it?
I love the art. It's freaking twisted.
Yeah, it's so twisted. So the idea is that you're usually children attempting to fight away nightmares in order to like, yeah, it's an adult game. So you're not running children playing children, but this is essentially like the twisted nightmares situation. Like this is kind of like I equate this to like Five Nights at Freddy or something like that, where you're playing a little more juvenile, but you've got nightmares running around the corners, and it's pretty, yeah, twisted, like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac style, or like you know, children have the most varied fears. There are more different flavors of terror than there are children, since there's room for every kind of monster in a child's head, like that kind of situation. So I'm always looking for like new ways to kind of explore, you know, what's visceral and interesting.
I'm just enjoying watching you get so pumped and excited about the different kinds of horror games.
Yeah, I mean, Doug kind of has it right. Dread is sort of a Midwestern Gothic feel. It really is truly a slasher movie from the 80s, if you think about it, though. Like, it really has that kind of attitude around it. So, yeah. Oh, and it looks like David S wants to see the board game collection. Dude, I can't even begin to get in on it. So it's let me go back to my camera so you can kind of see it. I mean, it's there. I mean, it's there, and then it bled over into here a little bit onto this table. All the kids' junk.
The real question is, how many of those games do you have that you still haven't been played yet?
Oh, there's a fair amount. And actually, I try to keep it so that these are all ones that have been played, and then the ones that are on deck are over here, the ones that I need to play. Like right now over there, I've got The Thing, Infection at Outpost 31, 10 Feet to Kill, Monster Lab. Actually a lot over here that I have played. Like, there's no reason that Baldur's Gate should be there because I've already played that thing to death. Freaking love Betrayal of Baldur's Gate. So good. But yeah, like Arcadia Quest I haven't played yet. Edge of Humanity I haven't played yet. I got to get that one out because that's from Golden Egg.
I have not played Betrayer of Baldur's Gate, but I've played the original.
It's not out yet. That's the reason. It's because I think they just ordered it. I think it just came out. But just because Shelley's awesome.
My favorite moment from House on the Hill is when the haunt happened, and that rocks. That is really cool. My favorite time we played House on the Hill is when the haunt happened, and I was actually playing the little girl.
Oh yeah.
I somehow ended up with the 45 prior to that. And I actually got to let an Eldritch Horror into the world and win the game.
Oh my god, that's amazing! Yeah, when I played it up at Seattle for Stream of Annihilation, I literally unlocked the Sphere of Annihilation haunt, in which I was moving around the Sphere of Annihilation around Baldur's Gate. You know, yeah, man. I mean, you're right. It's true. It's weird. It's weird that like. This is actually the one thing that I get really excited about is like you do get really addicted to these strong moments that players can get into. So and that's one of the reasons why when horror pays off, it is extremely satisfying. Someone's Jacob Stokes, you can see Sagas of Sundry on Join Team Alpha, or I'm sorry, it's just projectalpha.com. It is a paywall, it's an SVOD, but they do have a 30-day free trial if you want to check it out. It is usually a $5.99 subscription fee, but it's one of the reasons they put it on there is because it pays for premium content, because I will tell you, Sagas of Sundry was not cheap. And one of the reasons we're able to do it is because we are able to get support from direct subscriptions. And just like Netflix, which supports all of its billions of dollars of content to make original series, they're able to do all that because they have a subscription-based model in which to provide.
Because they have money. Because
they got money.
Nothing works without money in this world. I've been on the sets. I've seen. No, I actually, when I met you in person out there at Geek and Sundry, I've seen everything, and you can't do that stuff without money. It comes down to
YouTube, unfortunately, is not a place in which ad revenue is creating money anymore. So,
it does. It's just not very much, not to sustain a business like that.
No, it's really small. It will support a YouTuber shooting at home on their own system and cutting their own stuff, but it won't support a studio. Yeah, it's a different kind of bit. Yeah, I'm so glad, David, that you got Betrayal of Baldur's Gate. It is there. I'll actually show off one other thing, because I mean, you're a fan of Critical Role and all those guys, right?
I am in spirit more so than in actually like watching.
Practice, right?
Well, you know what I find as a content creator, I just don't have time to watch long content.
Trust me, I get it. I mean, 115 episodes is a lot to consume at a certain point. But just being aware of it in spirit, I think you'll appreciate what is literally sitting right next to me. Because one of the reasons that that I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now is because we had a very how do I say this? I've reached a new step in my book publishing company, mostly because of this thing. Da, 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 da. So I can actually feel pretty good about announcing this now. Like, I've been keeping this under wraps for like 8 months, but since Liam and Ashley and Laura and all of them already showed it off on the last episode, and they're going to be talking about it on Tuesday for Talks Machina. Like, this is mine. And if you notice, which hasn't been pointed out yet, but I'm going to do my best on Tuesday, that little symbol is my publishing company. So yeah, so this is the Critical Role art book. This is the limited edition one with the leather wrap, blind deboss gold foil with ribbon marker and everything inside of it. This is I printed this. Yay!
Nice. That's sweet, man. That's a good get.
It's a good, and it is a good looking book, but I'm very proud and very honored to have had the opportunity to print the Critical Role art book, and even the freaking standard edition is it's huge, and it's got a spot gloss on it. Blue spot gloss.
Oh, nice. Now that didn't go to Kickstarter, right? There was no Kickstarter for that.
Oh, this is a direct sale item. In fact, they have they're essentially it's not gonna have a pre-order from what my understanding is. Most of this is gonna be messaged through marketing, but they'll be able to order this very soon. Everyone who wants one will be able to order one very soon.
Wow, I can't believe someone made something without Kickstarter.
Yeah, right. Well, again, one of the benefits of having a company. So, it's super fancy. Yeah, and then it's funny because just literally right below that, as I have, hey, I don't know if you've seen this. This was kickstarted. This is the Sandy Peterson's Field Book for Lovecraftian Horrors. This is also another sweet book. I feel like most of my interview with you is just talking about my book collection, but check out these field sketches of freaking Lovecraftian horrors. This is awesome. That's a ghast right there. The art in this is from a French artist, and if they should have 100% won art for best art interior at the end, and the fact that they did is the one the one Chaosium win that I will give them. Chaosium swept house on at the Ennies this year at Gen Con, but that's the one where I'm like, oh yeah, you deserve that one because the art interior is amazing. So
nice. Well, we're beyond the hour mark now, which
fair enough. Yeah,
the hour is never quite long enough. Especially when we get a really cool guest on like yourself. And I appreciate you hanging out with us. And I appreciate all you guys for hanging out with us in the chat. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Thanks for having me.
Check out the description. Find all the links, people.
Yeah, go get it. We are about just a few thousand away from unlocking a new stretch goal. So hop onto the Outbreak Undead Kickstarter if you can.
Awesome. All right, guys, stay nerdy.